Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grafana Office Hours number 20. The lunatic is running the asylum today, and Nicole is letting me run run the show here. We'll see if this happens again. This may never happen again. This may be the one and only time that you'll see this happening, where I'm in the driver's seat. But anyway.
I just want to make it clear, I'm not letting him do anything. He just like shoved me out of the way. Hi, I'm Nicole van der Hoeven, and I am not letting Paul. I'm happy that he's taking over because I'm reporting from Potsdam, Germany. I had to think for a second where I was.
Where are you? We're gonna have a segment called "Where in the World is Nicole?"
Well, today
Totally,
it's in
totally.
Potsdam, Germany.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm glad that you're here, joining me, helping me to keep me on the road to righteousness. Because who knows what would happen. But yeah, so all right. Well, so enough of my banter. Let's go ahead and introduce our guests here today. Let's start with, I guess, I'm not going to have the right there, but Manu, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, hello. Thank you for having me today. My name is Manuel de la Peña, Manu. I'm Testcontainers Go maintainer. I work for AtomicJar, which is the company that is sponsoring the development of the open source libraries for test containers. And well, I'm really happy to share time with you today.
Awesome, thank you. And Pablo, this is a face I'm familiar with.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, I'm Pablo. I'm a senior engineer in Grafana Labs, working in Cases, and I'll be working in the Cases Chaos team. And well, I'm super happy to be here and also with Manu and talk about something we have been working in the last couple of months, I would say. And what started with a casual interaction became an interesting and profitable collaboration. That thing is really taking off. It's taking off, and I'm super excited of talking about this because I think this is what open source is about. And
Yeah.
Grafana is open source first, and I think the test container also, and that's what's happened when you put together people and get the freedom to work together across company just because we can have this open source and we can work on together. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely had to give a shout out to Emma from our team, one of our colleagues, Emma Valls. She kind of actually kind of connected everyone together to get this topic going. So definitely appreciate that. And then she's another one that's in Spain. So I don't know. Something's going on in Spain. I don't know. Is it the water or what? But there's a lot of tech coming out of there. So good deal. But yeah, so first, before we jump into everything, though, I just want to make some of the announcements of what's going on. Obviously, Nicole has been working diligently presenting about K6 and all things good testing at the Agile testing days in Potsdam, Germany. So yeah, so I don't know. It's evening there. I'm surprised you don't have a nice big beer. Oh, there we go. But yeah, so you and Marie have been talking there, so that's awesome, spreading the good news. But also one of the big events that we just had with Grafana was we had Observability Con earlier this week, which massive amounts of things were announced. Very exciting stuff. And let's see, I have a link to the keynotes, which I recommend really everyone actually go to and check it out because, I mean, we had some killer functionality that was released, around application observability, kind of bringing all this observability data together for your applications. A big announcement on the general availability for Grafana Bela, which is our eBPF product. And then we just had this acquisition of asserts.ai. So that's going to be for your incident management. So that's going to bring in a lot of really cool AI functionality. And we had some other libraries that we've released, open release for Sift and other things. So definitely go check that out. It was really a lot that came out. But
I actually have another announcement that
oh,
I just saw.
what is it?
I saw that Lisa, our colleague Lisa, just released a new video called What is DevOps? And it's
Yes.
part of her Grafana for Beginner series. So if you haven't seen that yet, go check it out because she's coming up with this whole series of videos that like walks you from knowing nothing about
Yep.
Grafana to actually being able to use it at work. So yeah,
See,
go check that out.
yes. See, that's why, Nicole, I'm so glad you made it. See, otherwise I would have skipped that. It would have been all embarrassing. But yeah, this is the second in the series that that Lisa's put out. It's good stuff, really. But
I
yeah,
have to keep you on your toes.
right. Somebody does. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Hopefully there's retirement someday and then I'll be out of everyone's hair. But
Hope not.
No.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh my. But yeah, so back to this program. This was originally going to be something that we were going to put on Cafe con Grafana, which I could not put the Spanish pronunciation on that very well, but because this was all pretty much coming out of Spain, you know, Emma and Pablo and Manu, everybody's coming out of Spain. So we're glad though that we got to get you on the regular Grafana office hours first. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump straight into it. I mean, Manu, tell us about Testcontainers. What's it all about?
Yes, thanks. Well, Testcontainers is a set of open source libraries. It started in Java mainly, and the majority of our users come from the Java ecosystem. But we are getting big in .NET, Golang, Node.js, and we have a lot of more flavors like Scala, Rust, Elixir is the latest one that came. So if you are working in different languages, any of them, you'll be able to have this flavor for Testcontainers. I'm the Testcontainers Go maintainer. I started in 2020, so more than 3 years as the core maintainer. And I came from working with testing, working with Docker containers. So for me, contributing to the team, to the project, and joining AtomicJar as a team 1 year ago, 1.5 years ago, for me was like the perfect project because it's testing, how to improve the developer experience of developers, making lives easier with testing and automation. And for me, it's a perfect project. It's usually integrated with your build system, so it automatically works with if you're talking with Java, Maven, Gradle, etc. But specifically for Go, which is the one I'm focusing on today, it naturally works with the Go toolchain. So at the moment you run your tests, everything will be there for you. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to go to a terminal, a separate make file to run the test for you. No, everything works out of the box with the test runner.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, I have had some exposure to Testcontainers back in a past life when you know, my moniker is Java Ducky. You know, I in all honesty, I've had that name since about 2001, so it's a little late to try to change to Go Ducky or anything like that, or
Haven't
maybe
you
even
learned your
Elixir
lesson?
Ducky. I don't know. That does sound cool. That's got a ring to it. But yeah, but no, I do remember using that, and it was pretty impressive. In that you know, in the Java code, we were doing microservices and things with Spring Boot, and then you could do the annotation and have this container spin up and do your unit test that way. So that's really cool. But now, so you actually work for AtomicJar. What's the relationship there?
Yes, AtomicJar is a company that created by the founders or the creators of Testcontainers, and the idea was to provide this better experience, and we're creating products on top of Testcontainers. AtomicJar is hiring the maintainers, specifically Node.js, Java, and Go, and is sponsoring the development of the project. We have a cloud offering where we allow you to run the containers in our cloud in a very, very transparent manner. But at the end, the open source libraries should work as expected. The cool thing of Atomic, what we offer as AtomicJar as a company, is that it enriches the experience of using test containers, providing this better experience with them.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's always good when there's a company that's pretty much sponsoring some of these open source projects. I mean, Grafana being a good example, right? I mean, all of our products are open source. We of course have a cloud offering. We got to get paid. I mean, Nicole has to get paid somehow. So it's
Just me, not you.
wait, you get paid. I don't, right? Do I? No. But
You get paid in healthcare like most Americans.
There we go. Yeah. None of that universal care for us. Thank you. Yeah.
So
No.
Manu, what is a test container anyway?
Well, test container, you know that Docker is a technology that modernized the development lifecycle. So everybody started deploying to Docker. Now we have Kubernetes, we have other alternatives. But at the end, everybody is producing a Docker image from their as an artifact, final artifact to be deployed. So this Docker runtime, which container runtime, it's very convenient. Offers very convenient APIs to manage the lifecycle of these containers, to create containers, start container, stop them. So test containers come with user-friendly or developer-friendly APIs to interact with these Docker APIs. So you don't have to know the internals of Docker. You don't have to know the internals of the payload that you have to send to the Docker. It's exposed HTTP endpoints at the end of the day. So in Java, in Go, in .NET, you have this wrapper on top of the Docker APIs to interact with Docker in a very, very user-friendly. So you have a container lifecycle where you can start, stop, create, terminate, etc. The container. And one of the things that I like the most from test containers is that you can define very fine-grained conditions to wait for a container to be started. Imagine that you need a log. You have the log, the container log, or your application log, and you need an entry to be there to check that it's ready, like MySQL, accepting connections. Or you need a HTTP port to be available, or an HTTP endpoint to respond with a certain code, HTTP code, or a certain payload. So test containers offer these weighted strategies, the name that we use, that you can combine them to have this readiness health check. So it allows you to control when your application is ready in a very fine-grained way. And for me, this is super important for development standpoint, because you can probably want the database to be loaded, or with the test data, for example, or an HTTP health check to be responding to 100 OK in when the application is finally ready.
And I mean, I guess, and really these containers, I mean, there's no limit as far as like what resources could be loaded in, right? I mean, do you find that typically people are using for like databases and such? You mentioned MySQL.
Yes, Postgres is one of the most used Docker images, but anything that could be in a Docker image could be containerized using test containers. In test containers, we have two different approaches to model your application. Is what we call generic container, which is you cook it, basically. You cook it you define an image, which is docker.io or your own private registry, with the fully qualified name of the image. You define the volumes, you define if you want to copy files in the container before it is started, the weighted strategies as already said. If you want to expose some port, because one of the important things in test containers is that it allows you to well, it automatically creates a random pod for you. Imagine in your test strategy, you want to run containers in parallel, and you want, for example, MySQL, the well-known pod is 3306. If you start two at the same time, you will have a collision in pod, and the second one will die, will be killed by the Docker. So it automatically exposes a random pod for you if you need it, and it allows you to discover this pod with an API in the public APIs of Testcontainers. So you can get the mapped port for the container, and it will give you the int representing the random port for that. So it's very easy to create a connection string to this running container from Testcontainers. Yeah, so we have databases, as I said. We have streams, queues like Kafka, Red Panda. We have RabbitMQ. We have also cloud emulators like Local Stack, which is huge in the community. Also, we have modules for Google Cloud Services also. So you can interact with PubSub, with, well, I don't, there are a few of them. Cloud Store, I can take a look at the documentation. Yeah. But one other thing that I mentioned is that you have generic container and you have modules, which are pre-configured technologies that we as an open source project offer. So you don't have to build your image again and again and again. It comes with the kind of accepted best practices for the technology, MySQL, Postgres, etc. And with that module, it's almost one-liner. You import it, and in one line you have the given technology. In the case for K6, is K6 module run container, and you have it. You have a K6 module running in your project, in your test project.
Yeah, I really love this part of the module because you say the API, the one that you were describing initially, it's really developer friendly. Managing the container for that API is really easy, and solve most of the problem that we in my team we had before we adopted Testcontainer. We were doing all you described by hand. It's a lot of boilerplate code just to get the container running. That's for us make a lot of sense. When we discover Testcontainer was, why are we doing this? This for already solved this problem. But the nice thing is that you also have this other way of creating customized model. Like you can create your own for your own application. You can say, okay, these are the typical steps that developers need to set up this component, and you can create a module for that. And as Manu said, then you just call it and store it. And all this detail of which image you're using, how you are initializing data in the container, how you are finding this, all this you can be packaged in that model. So you can create either using model from the community, but you can create your own modules in your for the developer. So it's really easy to reuse this. Sometimes people really not appreciate how complex it is to have a proper integration test running, because the main problem of integration tests is that they're flaky because of the setup. It's usually when the flaky test fails, 99% of the time is because the setup was failing, because the port was a port collision. Hey, we have been there all the time, or because something happened. So really being able to put all this logic, this knowledge of how to properly launch this component for testing and wrap it in your own API, so you can just basically call it and say, boom, I want one of those. And you can do it in parallel. That's also what I love, because you can run them in parallel. And you can also have very nice features like you can reuse them if you want. If you have very expensive component for integration test, you can just start once and use across different tests, and the system automatically will decommission that at the end. You don't need to be worried about, oh, I need to sorry, and then I need to remember to cancel it. All that kind of things that make the integration test experience miserable, I would say, is something I really like about Testcontainers. As you see, I'm really advocating, because it really solved a lot of problems for the project that was working.
Mhm.
So that's something interesting for us.
Yeah, and then there's like also too there's like also the whole thing about what's a unit test versus an integration test. And I know you were mentioning the integration test, doing some end-to-end testing, and that where you have all that infrastructure kind of set up that you would use in the container. I mean, do we see this test containers being used at the integration level where, like, a developer is sitting there working, and then unit tests are meant to be quick, fast feedback loop. Do we suggest using the test containers for unit tests, or just sticking to integration?
Yeah, this is a really good question, because at the end there is a lot of controversy. Where do we put the limit? Or at the end, whatever it works for you, then whatever word that works for you, it's fine. Traditionally, we have the testing pyramid with everybody accepts like a kind of a standard, and well, it says 70% unit, 20% integration, but of course, this 70% must be super quick, blazing fast.
Right.
When it was created almost 20 years ago, the tooling that were at that time, they didn't allow to run integration tests that fast. Nowadays, with Docker, for example, you are able to spin a container in seconds, or not milliseconds, but it could, depending on the image, it could be milliseconds. So why not consider an integration test as a unit test? And also, with the rise of microservice, if your microservice is only talking to the database, why a unit test should be something else that not talking to the database? So if you're talking, your only responsibility as a service is to talk to the database persisting data, why not consider a unit test this integration or this test with a real database?
Yeah.
So for me, the meaning of or the importance of how to name one or the other is test with real dependencies. And with test containers, you can test with real dependencies. So you can configure the database or the service that you interact with the same image, for example, the same configuration for production. Of course, it's not the same because you don't have the same machines or the number of nodes, etc. But you can try to replicate that in some manner. But you are using the same configuration. For example, for MySQL, using the UTF-8 encoding for everybody. So you don't have to rely in who installed what version of MySQL in their laptop, and it's different. Things like that. So everything is versioned because everything is in the code. So it's versioned alongside the code and evolves with the code. So for me, it's really important about the test.
Yeah, no, it's definitely more powerful. I mean, because of course you can in the past, typically you would mock, right? You would mock those services so that you weren't going against a real instance, but then you had to maintain the mock. And what if the version, a new MySQL version comes out, and you have all of a sudden there's different behaviors and things like that? Well, you have to go back to your mock and update that. And
mock always. What is the problem that we have, for instance, like try mocking Kubernetes? Because you have a mock, but the mock is basically we spend more time at some point working around the limitation of the mock. That at the end, say, you know what, we're launching our own cluster. So the question is, how do you launch it quickly? Because I think in my explanation, historically, one of the reasons there was this hard distinction between unit tests and integration tests was time, but also effort. And unit tests were meant to be self-contained and quick. And now, using the container, you can have integration tests are self-contained and quick. So is still really an integration test? And we're actually moving one step further in the
earlier,
project. We are actually doing end-to-end tests now. We are going the next step. We say, you know what? Challenge accepted. We already have the integration test using Testcontainers, and then we wanted to move into having end-to-end tests. And that is where we found something interesting is, can we use cases for that? Because
So one
as
thing,
Manu said, yep, yeah, because
sorry.
Manu said the test container library are means to be used by the same language you're developing, right? And we're developing in Go. So we end up having quite complex end-to-end tests in Go. And at some point, I was creating an end-to-end test using a cases script as a base and implementing in Go. And I was like, there is something definitely wrong with this. Do they? I mean, there are people that are creating that in cases. Why cannot use them? Because at the end of the day, I want to stretch application. That's the intention of a end-to-end test, to basically test your application in a realistic environment. And then is when the idea of how can we mix this power of containers, container-based testing with cases, and this is basically what take us to this conversation that we're having now.
I think one of the problems with the semantics of what is a unit test versus what's an integration test is that the names like use unit, system integration make you think that it's about what you're testing. But actually, the way that they're used a lot of the times is it's an indication of where along the process you're testing.
Mhm.
So when they say unit tests, it's not just that you're testing a unit of the code, like a smaller module of the code, but these days it kind of takes on the connotation of you are testing alongside your application code within the code itself, and it no longer has to be just like one small module of the code, because now we have the technology to be bringing some of the integration stuff or end-to-end stuff into the code, and now the semantics cease to matter too much. But what I really like about this is I'm coming at it from a different point of view from I think the rest of you, because I'm looking at this from the point of view of a tester, and I'm thinking it's not just that developers are empowered to test, but testers are also one able to do their job better, but also able to be testing way earlier and
Mhm.
within the code. So it's kind of it's bridging the gap, that bringing both the dev and test together with some ops principles and practices thrown in there. So this really is embracing the whole agile concept of the term developer not really distinguishing between, someone who writes application code versus someone who writes test code versus someone who creates and maintains the CI/CD pipelines and does operations on the application. So it's really about breaking down the silos, and all
True.
because of a technology that makes things easier. I mean, Docker has existed for a while, right? But just bringing that a little bit and making it more accessible does a lot for breaking down those silos.
Totally.
Absolutely.
And you said something like what you're saying. Like I was copying this test that some of you guys, maybe you, Marie, developer, quick picture, you're a tester, right? I was looking at the code and say, "Whoa, this is really cool test." Um, and that's another the beauty is that, and one of the things that we always promote from cases is having this approach of testing as code is that you can share easier is to share code. So our mindset was at this point of testing the application, and that is something interesting. When we were testing unit tests or even integration tests, it's in our realm because you're developing this project. But when we're testing the application, that you move into another mindset, and then you really see who is the pro tester in the sense that people has the mindset of testing applications. And you say, well, I want to actually reuse that knowledge and just bring this test from the testers as a developer because I'm profiting on their experience of testing. They are more the way they approach, the way they create the scenario, the way they model user journeys. I realized that we tend to be a lot more simplistic because it's just about the mindset. It's where you are usually thinking. So I think that also breaking the barrier between integration tests and end-to-end tests, at the same, you can bring end-to-end tests and use them at any stage of development. We don't need to wait for the tester to test. We can just take the same test and bring back and create an environment as a developer of something functionality and run this test. And that will give us a lot more confidence because we are basically testing the real thing, more or less in the same way that the user will do it. Because that's another important part of testing, that end-to-end tests tend to replicate complicated or complex interaction with the application.
Yeah, and it's awesome too, the ephemeral nature of the with these tests too, so that you don't have to worry about the end state of that container. It's that container is going to go away. So for the next iteration, you're starting from the same point again. So I don't know, but yeah. So I mean, so obviously, Pablo, you were kind of scratching your own itch for some of your testing needs when you created the K6 module and contributed that. You know, what was some of the thoughts that you had around that when you were doing it?
Yeah, as I said before, the realization that we were trying to create end-to-end tests in Go, which is perfectly doable, but then as typical developer in Go, we try to create kind of a small library for reusing elements. And the more I was working on that, the more it looked like cases. Like, yeah, I need to check condition and I need to do, the typical thing, execute some series of steps, gather some the results, check the results, and have a way to summarize the results. And they say, this is cases, this is what a cases does, and they very well. Why am I doing this in Go? I mean, that does not make sense. So the question was, okay, as a Go developer, so, and I already was using Testcontainer for integration tests from the Go. So the next question was, okay, how can I mix cases tests that are JavaScript tests and run? And the answer was, dude, you put that in a container and run cases in a container. That is, I mean, and going back to my previous comment, the nice thing about Testcontainer that it was pretty easy to create a module. Instead of just starting the cases image that we have and anyone can run, there are a lot of steps, like you need to make the test the script available to the container, and you need to set up some environment variables and stuff. So basically, what the model does is just encapsulate that in an easy way. So we'll show later in a quick demo. And this is basically one call. You say KC run, boom, done. That is next. And once it's finished, you really realize how convenient it is, because you basically encapsulate all this knowledge of how to properly set up cases and running in a container in a library, and now it's available. Fortunately, we could make it available to the community because we contributed that to the community. But if there was something internal, you can make it available for other developers in your organization. And then basically, the first person that know how to properly set up this piece of dependency and set up whatever it is a database, is whatever, you can basically encapsulate in a module. Yeah, that's more voiceless. So maybe we're talking a lot in abstract. Maybe we show some code. Show me the code. Yeah, it probably made a little bit more sense to the audience to really understand what kind of problem we are solving.
Yeah,
how easy it is, actually.
That's what I'm always waiting for. Demo. So here, let's take a look. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's start. Okay, the context of this is that we have this application in the developing in the cases team, which is called Quick Pixel. And the Quick Pixel is sort of like a way for demo the cases. But then we realized that it's really a very convenient way for testing, because it's a kind of realistic application. In our case, we need an application that could be deployed as a microservice application in Kubernetes, which it can be, and is properly instrumented for OpenTelemetry, which is also important for us. And around it, because it's been shared by different teams, other folks in the case system are developing, creating tests for that. For instance, here is an example. This is a small test that basically make a request for a pizza with some argument like you can basically good pizza allows you to create custom pizzas. You give some parameters and it is creative and create a pizza for you, given this limitation, like is vegetarian or not, how many toppings you want. And it's really funny, fun application.
I'll
And
have
this
you
is
know
a test.
this is a cruel trick. It's not even it's almost lunchtime for me now. So yeah, talking about pizza, I'm gonna be hopefully you don't hear my stomach growling from the
It's almost dinner for me, so I'm right there with you.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you
And you
order
see
us
this
some, please?
going. And you see, this is a typical cases test. And you see some scenarios, you define some condition that you want to meet this test, which is important for end-to-end test. And all this is actually existing. Just copy this. I mean, I didn't do anything with this. I just reusing a test that was somebody else in the team developed. And this allow us to test the application. Just to give you a little bit more context for the audience, I'm working in another extension for cases with the chaos extension that basically allows you to inject failures in your target cluster. So one of the things we want to do is to be sure that when you deploy an application there, we only break things that we want to break and nothing else. So being sure that the application is healthy before the test, and then when we run the test again with default, we want to check that we've seen the kind of failure we expect or not. So for us, it's really important to have this end-to-end testing because we really want to be sure that the application is running properly. So this is a test that you very just copy. I mean, there is no value here. And and this is I think let's just show how it looks like in a test. This is a Go test. The equivalent test for this before using Testcontainers and the cases model was like, I think about like 200, 300 line of code. And this is one third of that. And most of this code is actually boilerplate that we can even put in more concise way. So the logic, the steps of these steps are: first, we create a K3S container, which is basically a cluster, a Kubernetes cluster running in a container. And that's the first step, okay? And that could be reused, by the way, if we have running multiple end-to-end tests, we could reuse this cluster. So here you see everything like a one single test just for the purpose of simplicity. But in general, you can kind of have deploy your cluster, okay? And see, it's a one-liner. Boom, you have a cluster. You have this line of code here, launch a K3S cluster. Okay? And when you go from here, you know that this is running or not, because if something fails, this module has some check internally, and it does check fail, it will fail at this point. And then we are deploying the QuickPix application on top of that. The QuickPix application is a Kubernetes application. Here's the manifest. All the components, multiple services. It's quite a big piece of deployment. It's everything you want. And what we're doing here is we're copying this manifest to the cluster, applying it. This is basically executing the kubectl inside this container, and then waiting for the application to get ready. By the way, as we talk, we have been behind the scene, Manuel and I working on improving the K3S module. So all these step up will be now part of the standard K3S. So as we use it, and that's the beauty of open source, we say, okay, this is kind of common thing. You will always need to do these steps. Create a cluster, copy the manifest, apply the manifest. Why won't you apply this as a primitive? So that's the way the modules work. It's like you find some common user pattern and you enhance the library by adding new primitive. Okay, this is still work in progress, but very soon, all this boilerplate will be one line of code. You say deploy the application and wait for this condition, and then you are done. So at this point, when you are here, you have this application running, so you are ready for running the cases test, the one I showed before, this one, against this cluster. And here is where the cases model comes. Okay, you basically with this code, we are passing this script to the container, giving the test the endpoint to the clusters, because now you have K2S running as a container, and then you have cases another container, and the test in the cases need to reach the other one. And this is very easy to do from the K2S API, which has a method that gives you this endpoint. And so you basically here are running cases script inside a container and passing the environment variables so the test can know where is the endpoint. And that is, and you have now running.
Okay, and so this is kind of like where you were saying that say if you had parallel tests running, so you had multiple K3S clusters, then that randomized port, you would get that back when you were calling for the container there, right? You would.
Yeah, absolutely, because
Okay.
this is the nice thing, is like here you are just asking the container which is your IP.
Yeah.
And also it is both the same port in the host, that all that is totally hidden by the model itself. So you basically have some standard way to get the endpoints to the different containers. In this case, we need the endpoint of the cluster because we are running the test in another container. Okay, so we need the communication. But this is super easy. I mean, it's once you get the API. And as I said, here basically the idea of having this model is because behind this simple call of run container, there's a lot of intermediate step, like taking this script here and copying into the container and all this step. That's the word I say that's why you create models, to encapsulate this repetitive setup that every time you want to run a test in cases, you need to do this step. So you put that in the model. So it's easy way you consolidate to your knowledge on how to use that piece of code.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I mean, it's really for me it was as I said before, there are now some intermediate steps that we are trying to simplify. And that's again what I said at the beginning of this talk, of the beauty of open source. Like we come to this and found this and say, okay, this is still convenient, but I find myself doing this over and over
all
again.
The time, yeah.
All the time. Why? So talking to Manuel, say, okay, let's try to enhance it to make a single call that once you hit the container, you can say, I want to deploy this, and I want to wait for this condition to happen, which tells me that the complication is ready, and then I can safely run the test because the application is already, all the pods are running, and all initialization is finished. And this is the pattern you basically found yourself all the time, and thinking how is the best way to launch this dependency, and then creating some library model that encapsulate that, or you can now repeat it time and again in other tests.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And then, but yeah, I see how the, passing in a manifest all the time and doing all that work can be a little bit boilerplate and redundant. But yeah, I can completely see this too being used for like things like, oh, validating a Helm chart or something, because I would assume there's no reason why you couldn't in this test code use the Helm client to deploy a chart into that K3S cluster. So, but
There's
no,
so
that's
much
cool.
stuff like that when we get into Kubernetes and manifest files and configuration. Like sometimes the best way to test is to start from the static tests, like before you even run load tests.
Yep.
Like there are a lot of best or recommended practices that you can check for. And
Yeah.
I think you can get a lot of value out of that already.
Baby steps, right? It's like how do
Yeah.
you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
One bite at a
It's
time.
yeah, Kubernetes is a big elephant, let me tell you. No, that's really cool. That is really cool. But yeah,
I need to,
Hmm?
no, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I'm really excited to hear that about this the K3S module, because I mean that's that's huge. I mean, I can see myself using that here in the near future, honestly. I will definitely be checking that out.
And the key to it is really fast. We started in the team, in the project, we started using, typically one of the problems that we found is like, you have these test tools or test container like Minikube or Kind.
Hmm.
We were using Kind. But those has no programmatic, I mean, there are no API for them. So you usually launch them in a script. And
Right.
then it's messy to see what happens exactly. Then you find yourself in this strange situation that you need to launch probably a script from the Go code to then come back, and this is really not convenient. So we did initially, like 1 year ago, was to create a library for launching the can container and have a lot more control and really being able to check for conditions. And when we found the K3S container, it was like, wow. I mean, we basically remove a lot of boilerplate in our tests just because now we have a programmatic way, which for me is really convenient. So you here are basically this line of code, and you have a lot of customization you can do. This is I'm just launching here the vanilla plain version and with the default condition, but basically here either the cluster started and is ready or not. All the checking, everything is already happening. As I mentioned before, for me, it's been one of the biggest problems when you're trying to start this kind of infrastructural component in a script, whatever. It's how do you check it? How do you propagate? You find yourself like parsing the log of the output of some external thing just to see if things are ready or not, and it's really inconvenient. Here you have an API as a developer, you can check, you can use your default checks, or you can define your own condition. I want to wait for, like in this case, I want for the pod to be ready, but if you can be more precise, you can execute a specific command inside the container and check that this condition is met before you try to execute your tests. Because in my experience, as I said before, most of the faulty tests and integration tests is because something didn't really happen as you expect. I've seen so many times these tests which wait, like launch something externally and wait 10 seconds. Well, it works until you put that in the CI/CD, and the CI/CD workers are much lower, and now it's not 10 seconds but 12. And then your test fails because so creating resilient tests that are reliable is a lot of yeah, that's true. They were also using that, and creating tests in this way for me is really convenient. I don't know, Manuel, what your experience with all the for using test containers.
Yeah, I think you explained it very well. This is one of the reasons of teams are using test containers, having the same experience in the CI, in local, everywhere.
No, that's awesome. But so Manu, what kind of features have you been working on now? I mean, what's kind of the high priority items that you're working on? I mean, obviously there's going to be some K3S nice synthetic sugar coming along, but that Pablo kind of gave away there. But what other things have you been focusing on with the project?
Yeah, well, thanks to this collaboration with the K6 team, with Pablo specifically, we have discovered that, well, we are defining a container lifecycle where users can execute code before and after certain points, like Docker events, like create, start, stop, and terminate. So we discovered that the wait strategies that we are applying were not run well. Were run in the proper place, but could be misleading for the users wanted to use the post-start events. So, for example, Pablo wanted to run some code, but it always happened after the wait strategy. Sorry, before the wait strategy. So it was not possible for him to satisfy the conditions because it was not there. So we are creating a new event which is ready. So at the moment, all the container is created. It's before created, before started, and then we define ready. And after ready, you can inject code. For example, these wait for pods that Pablo shared could be part of this ready event hook. When we are copying files to the container, we always use the post create, because you can copy files when the container is created. You can copy files into there because Docker already have this container listed, so they are there even before the container is started. So polishing this container lifecycle is one of the things that are working well this week. Also improving the experience running commands into the container. For example, providing environment variables, changing the work directory for the user for the command that you are running into the container, and more recently, more product related, trying to identify what is the best experience for. Pablo already mentioned to reuse containers. Think about how it's better, how is the best way to reuse containers. Because this is important for us as a company, not only as an open source project, because we want to align all the languages and follow the same way to reuse containers. Because if you are working in your project now in Go, and tomorrow you move to another thing using Elixir or Java or .NET, you want the same experience. You want to have the same building blocks there, or your expectation about how this should work should be the same. For us, this is important. And reusing a container, I think is important because Pablo shared it before. So depending on where you put the initialization of the cluster, in this specific example is really good because you don't want to bootstrap a Kubernetes cluster for every test. You want to start it once. So it's not a problem of the tool. It's the problem that we sometimes forget about designing our test suites. We probably just delegate to the tool and the tool will run everything. But we don't want to run 1,000 containers at the same time. Probably one or two or maybe 100. I don't know. It depends. But many times we are not thinking about this test strategy. In this case, okay, let's put the cluster first in a singleton way. So you start it once, and you start the container. You start your test and destroy the data that it produces every time, or create an architecture of the data that every data is stored in a namespace or in a single column value or something like that. So you don't pollute your database with tests running in parallel, for example. So
we actually,
yes.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
We actually have a question from Antoine, who says, "Can I use chaos engineering with test containers?"
That sounds like a leading
Oh,
question. Did Pablo, was that a plant from you by chance?
yeah. Thank you, Antoine. Thank you. Yeah, actually, I didn't mention that, but the project that I'm working that led all these collaborations is precisely running chaos tests um, using cases. It's an extension called the cases disruptor. And I mentioned at the beginning that the say is basically we deploy the application in this test container, and we inject forms, and then we use the cases for validating the results. So you basically use that. So for part of the say the cases that I'm aware with, our future is to this cases model is say really generic and basic in the sense that it's just encapsulate the cases image in a very handy way, facilitate running tests inside this container. But following the test container philosophy, one of the things we want to do now is exercise more dog fooding. So we are using them in our own tests and learn more what are the probably friction points so folks can actually start using cases in their end-to-end test in any environment locally or in the CI/CD because I think it is really powerful. Um, I know that for many folks, cases historically has been considered more load testing exclusively tool. But for instance, now we have the browser, which we can just check that you make some change, you deploy the application in your container, and you run cases and you run different user journeys with it, and you verify you are not breaking everything. You can automate all that using the same approach. So one of the things I'm moving forward, I want to try is running browser tests using this approach. There are some issues because the browser tests have some technical difficulties to put it. Basically, the browser test requires a Chromium process. So the idea that I have is like learn how to do it properly and then encapsulate that in the cases module or maybe creating a cases browser module that depends on or adding some options like for instance here with browser so you customize your cases image so you can be sure you can run your browser test and for me that's going to be a really powerful combination for any tester that you can basically have this you see I mean you basically have this manifest for the application somebody provides you don't even know what's that you don't need to know anything about Kubernetes because launching the Kubernetes is one line of code and soon deploying the application will be probably one line of code. So you as a developer, you can create the end-to-end test and reuse or test your cases code to test easily and reproducible. So I think this is opens a totally different, I would say, way of running cases tests. And I personally really excited because I see that we can really move toward different use cases than the traditional cases use cases. Like anyone should be using cases for end-to-end. I personally believe that it's much more powerful than anything else I've tried before for end-to-end tests. There are space for unit testing, for integration tests, but when it comes to end-to-end tests, and now that we have the browser, for me was like what I will do to something different than just running this browser test and this is the real end-to-end test. Boom. Is my application working or not? That is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
forgetting about all the boilerplate code of setting the environment. That's for me the goal in this collaboration.
Yeah. That's
Can
good.
you actually run that demo?
Yeah, it's take a few. It
Yeah.
took only a few a minute or something. You
Yeah.
see,
And
it's
then
basically it's really now is creating the K3s. I mean, deploying the cluster, and
Just take a look at the waiting strategy here that I mentioned before. So it's checking for a log entry here. So until this log entry is not there, it won't return the control to the test.
Yeah. One detail, the cases part, and this is probably one of the things, is we are using this extension, which is called KCX, that basically take any dependency that you have in your test and compile on the fly. That is what's happening here. And this is the kind of thing that you probably want to do only once if you have multiple tests, because you don't want to do it. That's what it's taking a little bit longer, because it's probably downloading some stuff from internet and just usually you don't want to repeat it for every test. That's one of the optimization that we are working with on. Sorry.
So
And
I have a question, actually. So right now we are in, this is Go code, and we're running a K3s container with K6 in it using test containers. Can you use test containers to do the opposite? Because one of the languages that was mentioned was Node.js. So I know not all Node.js stuff is compatible with K6, but theoretically, is it possible to run something like maybe as part of a test script, run conditionally different versions of an application or different components of an application based on the results of a test?
Well, you could use test containers node for your application.
Yeah.
You decide what you put into the image. One of the patterns that we see, and we offer an API for that, is to create an image from a Docker file. So if your application has a Docker file, the test will be able to build it automatically for you and start it, and you run the test against that application.
Oh, you're giving me an idea, Nicole. Maybe we can create an extension that is cases X test containers, so you can basically
that's what I was thinking.
Because I think that the Node.js one won't run, because you know that we have some limitation on the JavaScript.
Yeah.
You are not really a Node.js compatible. But that you're proposing is a really interesting idea. Maybe for the hackathon.
Yeah, I think so. I think it'd be cool. It would make a test
It's
more
pretty cool.
self-aware, like a test that changes the application itself or the environment itself.
Yeah, Colin K. Nicole. All right. Okay, let's do something. I will work on that, but you do the presentation. If we have a deal for that, we can work on that extension.
Sure.
There you go.
Absolutely. That sounds great. KubeCon next year?
Yeah.
Okay. Deal.
All right. Well, so let's see. But yeah, so Manu, we're running out of time here, but so where is the feature parity between the Go language support for test containers versus, Elixir or Java, which I know Java is kind of the prime one, right?
Yes, I would say that Java is the one with more maturity. Next would be .NET, and the third one would be already paired with Go. So those are the two languages that come second after Java. Node.js is also coming as improving in the parity. So overall, regarding modules, Java has a lot of modules. .NET has a lot of modules. We have added a lot of modules in Go, and Node is also doing that. The maintainer was recently hired for us, so it's getting time to do it. The rest of the languages are community maintained, so we don't control them. For example, Python, Elixir. So we have maintainers in the community that do their job, and it's amazing that they can do that in their free time, and they are passionate about test containers. And we usually don't, from time to time we talk to them, but we don't control that. We can come with an RFC, with something that we are planning to do, make RFCs public about how a library must behave. So yes, Elixir is the later one. It came less than 1 month ago. So I would say that has the lowest number of features, but the user is very active. The maintainer is user active, and he will start contributing more and more. Also, we have Ruby, Haskell, Clojure, Scala, many languages.
So even Haskell. So really getting there. Cool.
Yeah.
No. All right. Well, so where should, if people want to contribute or help out with the project like Pablo had in the past, I mean, where should they go? What do you recommend?
Well, we have two sources of truth in that sense. Is one, our GitHub organization, which is GitHub Testcontainers. I will paste it in the link. And also our Slack. I think it's testcontainers.slack.com. And well, we have separated channel for language, even for region. If you speak Spanish or English or German, we have people in Germany, in the US, in England, so Spain. Slack will be for community, and also our GitHub repositories: Testcontainers Go, Testcontainers Java, Testcontainers.net, Testcontainers Node.js. That will be the best place to talk to us. And we the maintainers are there on the Slack, so you have a chance to talk to us firsthand.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I'll make sure that we get those links in the show notes or in the description below, so that folks watching after the fact can catch up on that. But yeah, so thank you so much for being on the session here. Thank you for your contributions. Both you and Pablo for these creations and making software continue to be fun. But yeah, and thank you, Nicole, for adding that to the screen there. See,
I've got your back.
She's got my back. You're the best.
Always.
Yes. And then, of course, one final thing I just wanted to point out to you is that, Nicole, we are hiring. So there's lots of positions available. So please do go check it out. Take the link there. You too could have the opportunity to work with Nicole. One of those positions is for a developer advocate like myself. So.
Oh no, now you're gonna scare them away.
No, it's always a good thing. But yeah, and then so next week is the holidays in the US. We have Thanksgiving coming up, and then Grafana shutdown day on Friday. So we're not going to have an actual live office hours, but I see that Nicole did add that we will be streaming a recorded episode about Grafana Agents Flow Mode.
By the way, Paul, do you want to do a recording about Grafana Agents Flow Mode?
Flow Mode? Okay, sure. I was kind of wondering. I was like, when did you do that? Why was I not invited? I was trying to appear
no
not
invite
hurt.
yet.
Yeah, I was trying to appear to be not hurt by that, by the exclusion. Nicole and I had too much fun, don't we?
Yeah, a little too much.
Yeah.
We're going to be doing it with Matt Durham, who works on Grafana Agents. So that's going to be cool. It's going to be a kind of part 2 to the What is Grafana Agent that we did a few shows back.
Yes, and Matt, I think I met him last week at KubeCon. So perfect. All right. Well, all right. Well, once again, everyone, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you both on. All three of you, I should say. And then thank you. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you
everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.